Hello, everyone. This is Victoria Mattia, and you are listening to the Mom Care Coach. So, I hope that you are having an awesome day, and this is an episode that many of you can relate to. And if you are a first-time listener to the Mom Care Coach, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that it is something that will bless your heart and that you will feel inspired by. And of course, if you are a long-time listener, thank you so much for coming back and joining. And so let's get on with the show. So today we're going to talk about something very interesting. It is a very personal topic, and I think a lot of people can relate. So the title of this episode is How I Get a Shower Every Day as an Autism Mom. So over a year ago, when I first started, or even actually before I started recording episodes, I did some market research and I went around asking a lot of different moms, maybe some of you are listening now, some of the different topics you wanted me to talk about on the podcast. And I heard a lot of different things, but it was mostly the same. It came down to stress management, self-care in the ways of how you got things done throughout the day that you needed to get done, and then even simpler tasks like how to make sure you are taking a shower every day, how you're able to eat food every day, how are you able to do the things that you need to do, especially when you have a child that has a lot of needs. They're really high needs, and you need to be there to support them throughout the entire day. And so I wanted to kind of hit this really personal and emotional topic because I know that this is something that you guys, many of you have asked for. It's something that, as myself, you've struggled with it on a daily basis, or maybe even during certain seasons of your life. And I wanted to just really be honest and raw and just really hit this particular topic in a way that is completely honest and authentic to myself, as well as it's a story that a lot of people have interest in on how to help themselves, and it's a topic that isn't really talked about in the media. You don't really hear about how to, inspire, people when they're struggling. You don't really hear about it in the government when they're talking about how to help kiddos on the spectrum. You don't hear about it on the news. But it's something that is very near and dear to a lot of mothers' hearts, especially mothers that have children on the autism spectrum that are full-time caregivers to their children for children that are level 2s and 3s, moderate to severe autism. So today I want to talk a little bit about how not just being able to take a shower every day when your child is really struggling, but how to support yourself with your 4 intentional needs. Now, I have shared with you before last summer the difficulties and how I actually had to take an unplanned 6-month hiatus, not just from the podcast, but actually from working as well. So I work from home, and I had to take 6 months off because my child needed me 24/7. I even at one point had to hire someone so that I could get daily tasks done for myself because of the severe complexities and difficulties that he was having on a daily basis. Now, currently we are in a different season, It is not as challenging as it was over the summer. There are still some challenges that are left over from the summer and the fall. However, not to the degree at all as it once was during the summer of 2025. So this one big idea, of course, is how to take a shower when you have a kiddo on the autism spectrum. Of course, this is going to hit home for a lot of mamas when you have kiddos that have really high needs. But also, not just that, it will probably hit home as you are in your parenting journey, but during a really challenging and hard season. Not every season is as challenging as another, no matter what your child has been diagnosed with. Parenting on its own is challenging, but there are certain seasons that are more challenging than others. So the pillar that we are really working with today has to do with mindset, which of course is tethered to having a calm mind, which is one of our core essentials. And of course, we have our 4 intentional needs, which are our core essentials. Our other ones, as a review, is nutrition, which is tethered to having a nourished body, sleep, which is tethered to having restorative rest, and movement, which is tethered to joyful movement. So last summer, it was so challenging to do anything really, and even to go to the bathroom for just 30 seconds or a minute was challenging. Now, in the past, just kind of a backup here, in the past when my oldest son, who has level 3 autism, he had a challenging season when he was about 8 years old. And during that time, he was really having a hard time with elopement. And I'm going to tie this together in just a second. During that time, it was really hard to go to the bathroom as well, because as soon as I went to the bathroom, even for 10 seconds, he would run out the front door. And he was really struggling with autism in the way of elopement. At that time, he would elope a lot, and he would put himself in dangerous situations because of the elopement. Over the years, he's had several years of therapies, and it started to kind of get better. We've had, I'd say, a few years of not a lot of elopement here and there, yes, but not as much. This past year, the elopement increased as it was when he was 8 years old. And so what happened with us, not only the elopement, but there were some other struggles that he was having that was making his choices very difficult, making the entire season very challenging, because he was not being safe, and he was causing himself not to be safe, and causing others around him not to be safe because of the choices that he was making. And so I needed to provide him 24/7 care. I even had to make sure I was in his room when he slept, because sometimes he would get up throughout the night, which is something that we've struggled with for years, sleep. And so therefore it made it challenging for myself to get enough sleep. But for him, during this past year, it was challenging because it was necessary for me to keep him safe and everyone around us safe. Now, if I'm comparing the different times in our lives with the difficulties and challenges that he was going through, the interesting thing is when your child is young, you are responsible for them in every way. You're responsible for providing income, providing nourishment as far as food, providing therapies, providing clothing, providing safety, providing just, everything. As your child gets older, my son is 14 now, he will be 15 let's see, the end of next month, so we have several weeks. And when they are teenagers, it's a little bit different depending on their levels, but it's also different because their mindsets are, maturing and changing. You have puberty that they are going through. And so for me, what's interesting now is that even though he has level 3 severe autism, he is verbal. And one of the things, he was able to start to notice different things about himself versus other children around his age. My son is very tall. And so when people would look at him, sometimes they may think he's older than he is. And that can present its own challenges. But also he was noticing other kids that may be around his height, his age, and how if they are neurotypical children, they may have different freedoms than himself. And when a child becomes a teenager, their emotions can be all over the place. They can, start to rationalize different things. Now, it may not be correct. Nonetheless, it is how they feel. And so they can start to act in different ways that perhaps they wouldn't act before, just because their emotions and because of puberty and because their thinking is different than how it was when they were young. And so what we started to notice was that he was becoming emotional over things that he could and couldn't do versus what other people could and couldn't do. And I'll give you an example that's not exactly the same, but it is an example nonetheless. Let's say, if you're a teenager or if you have a teenager, they may want to start doing some different kinds of jobs that will allow them to have some income. These jobs can be very helpful because now they have a little bit of income where they can start purchasing things for themselves. And of course, when they're able to purchase things for themselves, it gives them some freedom. And if a child is neurotypically developing, then they understand the boundaries that are put around what they can purchase, what they cannot purchase, what are some different options for them to create the income. Perhaps if it's the summer, they may kind of take on a role of being able to ask neighbors if they can cut their grass. That will give them some income, and they can purchase, an example, maybe a new game for their Nintendo Switch. However, if they are on the spectrum and they have a lot of needs, they're very high needs, and they may not understand that they need to have a job to purchase different things. Maybe an example would be they may start taking things that doesn't belong to them, or they may start stealing from their neighbors instead of asking them to cut their grass. So that's just, an example of how the understanding is that they know that they want something. They can see that maybe their peers have different things. They have different options available to them, different freedoms available to them. And maybe they look at themselves and say, hey, I want the same thing too. But they may not have the understanding of how to get those things in an appropriate way. And so they may start picking up different actions that can be unsafe for them and unsafe for others. So this is not exactly what was going on with my son. However, he was having some significant challenges around having the feelings he was having, the desires he was having, and putting them in congruence with what he was allowed to do, what he was capable of doing in appropriate ways, and having boundaries around himself, and how to get certain things that he wanted, or having certain opportunities that he wanted. And so throughout the summer, there was so many variety of different challenges, and it was very, very difficult for me and his brother, and how we were dealing with that. And going back to how we kind of started, how did I get a shower every day? So I'm going to answer that right off the bat now. I didn't get a shower every day because a shower would take too long. So I know when I was doing the market research, some mamas were telling me, hey, I have to wait till my husband gets home before I can get a shower, so they can watch my child. Or maybe I just wouldn't get one that day and I'd have to wait for another opportunity. So I'm going to tell you what I did, and maybe this can be encouraging to you as well. So number one, I did not get a shower every day. So in self-care, there are different options, and I had to think about what the end goal was. What is the purpose of a shower? The purpose of it is to get clean. Are there other ways I can get clean? Well, yes, I could take a bath. However, I couldn't take a bath because that would also take too much time away from my children, my family. As you know, I'm a single mom, and so my options are to make it work for me or to hire someone else. For me, it's not always easy to hire someone else because if they don't know my child, they don't know what their needs are and how to handle different behaviors and how to go through that process to see if this is basically to vet them, to see if this is something they could even do. You know, when you have a child with special needs, they're special because they need more accommodations. The needs are special because you need to have people around them that understands them, that loves them, that are willing to work with them, that are willing to offer them the help that they need. And sometimes when you are first vetting someone, aka hiring a new person, that takes some time. Not everybody can handle every child's needs. And so for me, yes, I can hire, but that takes time. And when there's an immediate issue, well, then you need to make sure that it will fit in your life. And then what can you do in the meantime? So what I did was I had to see, okay, what are the available options to me? Now, I've talked about this in the past when it comes to the ABCs of being an autism mom. If you go all the way back to the beginning of the podcast, as well as on my YouTube, I talked a lot about the ABCs of being an autism mom. And A has to do with, having access to resources. And so the resource that I needed to have was the ability to allow me time so that I could get my body cleaned and take care of my personal needs, as well as providing safety for my children. So what I decided to do is do something called an EO scrub down. And I've mentioned this in a recent episode, I believe. I can't remember if it was here on the podcast or if it was on YouTube. And so an EO scrub down is basically you take a washcloth, okay, in your bathroom sink. You run, hot water, as hot as you can stand it, that you're going to put on your body. You put a hot wash, or you take the towel, the washcloth, and put it in the hot water. Then you're going to put 1 or 2 drops of essential oils, your favorites, that are calming to you, in the water. And you're going to put, your favorite, body wash or whatever on it. And the whole purpose is to allow the hot water, the essential oils, and the texture of your washcloth and the stimulation of washing your body to help calm you down. And so I did that, and it would also obviously get me clean. And I could do that within, scrub my whole body within like a minute or two. and get clean, smell good, calm my body all at the same time. So what does that mean? Well, for access to resources, what did I have accessible to me? I had me being accessible to me. I did not have, another person that I had hired in the beginning. And so I allowed myself to take the 1 or 2 minutes to scrub my whole body, calm my body down, and stay clean. This would help to calm my mind as well. Next thing that I would do, and also as a segue, I do want to mention, so when I was scrubbing my body in that 1 to 2 minutes, I was not washing my face and brushing my teeth and everything at the same time, because that was not the time that I had accessible to me. I always believe it's important to work with what you have. And so I did, what I could with what I had. At a different part of the day, I would go in and brush my teeth. I would oil pull. I would rinse my mouth. And another time, I would wash my face. So that's how I handled that. Next thing, when it comes to nutrition, I remember during that season, if I was not intentional, I actually wouldn't even eat throughout the day. I would get to the end of the day and be completely exhausted and realize, well, I haven't even eaten today. So what I started to implement was having a shake a day. I talk about, there's different types of, protein powders out there and everything. The kind that I represent is really super high in protein, the protein powder as well. And then the shake that I would make was high in protein, high in fiber, high in vitamins and minerals and nutrition. So even if that is all I had that day, it was healthy, it was delicious, and I knew I was nourishing my body in the best way I could. The next thing that was really tough was getting sleep. Of course, sleep is tough. Even in seasons where it's not the most challenging in my experience with my son. However, during that season, it was really tough, because he started to go days without actually getting quality sleep. And I remember in the summer talking with his neurologist, and that's when we actually started to put him on some medication to help with that. He's on 2 medications right now. Well, that's right. Today we are really getting in the weeds. We are getting really vulnerable and really, talking about these things that matter, but don't always come up. So he is on 2 different medications, and I have found them to be really helpful in his mindset, in his well-being. I have always had lots of feelings when it comes to medications. You're never going to hear me on this podcast say really anything about medication except for the fact that he's on it. Because I think in different seasons, different people go on medication and it can be very helpful for them. And then other seasons, maybe you can lean more on nutrition and exercise and different things like that. It depends on the doctors and what they feel and if you're in agreement with that. So that's just what we did. That's what we're continuing to do. And when it comes to me and my own self-care, it was important for me to continue with that, with self-care for myself, because if I didn't, then I would not be able to be the mom I need to be for my children so that they can depend on me and lean on me, especially during these challenging seasons. So to review, I made sure I did my EO scrub every day to stay clean. During sleep, as I said, was really challenging. The days were really super long. And so the little things that I could do was what I did. The little thing that I did to help me get sleep was to make sure I had my PJs on every day. That sounds like something that's so simple, but when you're having a really challenging season, it was a big deal, because it's really tempting sometimes when you're so exhausted to just kind of crash into bed and to not even change into your jammies. And the reason why it's important is because typically speaking, PJs has a different kind of material. And so it is usually softer and more comfortable, which will help you to sleep. And so that is that little teeny tiny thing that I committed myself to doing every day. I did that. The little teeny tiny couple minutes of an EO scrub down that I committed to every day, I did that. The commitment of making sure I had a shake every day, yes, I did that. I supported my body and my mind with doing these little movements to help myself because I knew it would be very important so that I would be able to be strong, as long as I needed to be strong in that season. The last thing I'm going to mention has to do with, movement. Movement was tough because of what was going on, as I mentioned before. So was I doing a 10 to 15, even 30-minute workout? Absolutely not. What I did do, I tried to do some stretches. I try to do stretches every day. And that was my commitment for movement. If it was accessible to me, I would be able to go outside, take a couple deep breaths, and come back in the house. But that's what I did. And that is what I encourage you to do. This is a little bit of a longer episode perhaps, but I think it's important that we talk about these things and then come up with resources and to be able to help ourselves to do the things that we need to do. In the ABCs of being an autism mom, the second step, the B, is for building a bridge to the resources that we need, building a bridge to the connections that we need to have with other people to get our needs met. And then, of course, C really is having the calm mindset that we need to have, having the connections that we need to make with others, having the ability to be social as possible, meeting with other moms, connecting with others to learn new things that can be helpful, to learn more resources, to outsource as necessary as possible when it comes to our finances and our ability to be able to do the things that we need to do. But not overdoing things to make things more difficult for yourself. Make it within your ability so that you can be consistent. And also, of course, to be congruent in what you believe, what your lifestyle is, what is important to you, what you are willing to stand on. Those things, they matter. So I hope that this has been an episode that you can really understand and feel comfortable in, and of course, share with me your experiences and things that have helped you as well. And of course, do not forget, the most important thing is to take really good care of yourself so that you can take care of others and for you to be strong for you forever. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that this has been encouraging to you, and I look forward to speaking with you next time. Goodbye.